Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigria Gardenia. Today's guest is somebody that I think she and I have been talking about being on the podcast for months. And I'm kind of glad it didn't happen exactly when we started because she has come such a long way since then. And there is so much to talk about in the work that she's doing because she really is a pioneer in giving plants a digital space in which to share and connect. And there's just so much here. So I'm not even going to spend too much time introducing this episode. I just want to jump straight into this conversation. This is episode 102, Nature Data and Digital Botany with Sophie Gardner. Enjoy. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. All right, Sophie, how long have we been trying to do this? It's been months. So I have a feeling this is going to be so much fun because we're just going to be laughing the entire way as we go through this interview. And so I am so excited to actually get into this. We have known each other now for a while. I'm trying to remember how we met.
I think I remember you before you remember me because I saw you speak at a conference. It was either plant consciousness or nature consciousness
It was plant consciousness.
Yeah, near Regent's Park in London, and I saw you speak, and this is before I kind of started my official journey with the plant art, and I just was like blown away by what you said. And usually I'm quite shy, but I think I actually approached you to sort of say hi.
That was such a great, that I still stay in touch with lots of people that I met there. I've had clients come out of it, collaborators. It was such a great conference, and I'm kind of sad that they stopped doing them. But before we go down that route, right, because there's just so much to say about you and your journey, because your journey has taken you through a few different paths as you got deeper and deeper into this plant. Can you just tell everybody who is Sophie Gardner?
Hello. So I am an artist. I'm working with earth energies and plants and nature data alongside other mediums. I connect plants to circuits to read their electropotentials and get a kind of analog signal and then turn that into a digital signal which informs visuals as well as audio. So I'm kind of working with different kind of visual code, but I kind of generated some code that allows plants to paint pictures and doodles. So they kind of draw in three-dimensional space. You kind of get a sense of kind of the data in 3D. Kind of a lot of it looks 2D, but it's kind of an expression of communication and reaching to understand more about the data from plants. So
I love it. And here's the thing that I find that's fascinating because, like you said, we met in London, and right before plant consciousness, which was that conference you were talking about, I had done the Chelsea Flower Show with a different artist what's his name? Oliver. It'll come to me as I go. I don't know why I just blanked on his name totally. And he, who was also somebody who was a visual artist and, had worked with the music of plants devices to create a combination of soundscape as well as a certain amount of video. Like he had this really interesting interpretation that he was doing with video. And I loved when I started to see you develop. I've kept in touch with you over the years too, every once in a while pinging you because I really just love how you've taken this in a very unique perspective. I find it really fascinating that where The audio portion, no offense to audio, I'm an audio engineer, so I'm not dissing or digging or saying anything bad about audio. But what I have found is that those of you that do visual also aspects in addition to the audio have really taken this connection to plants in a whole different direction. Like where many of the audio people I feel are kind of stuck in human audio, it's very rare that I find people that are working with the plants using kind of completely different. I think I only know of one artist, and he also is a visual as well as an audio artist. But audioscapes seem to get stuck into a human paradigm. And yet, video, I have found for most of the people that are doing things like you, which is a very small subset, to be honest, I've found very few of you. You're really taking things in a super unique way. And so I'm so curious as to how does it develop for you? Like, who informs whom? Is it the plant telling you? Is it you trying to train the plant? Like, where does it all come from and how does it go?
Okay, I definitely don't train the plants. Working with cats, herding cats. Like, they're doing their thing. They're just gonna do their thing. The plants are definitely informing me, and it's like lots of like I'm picking around with code, right? It's not exactly video. It's a live coded
Right.
kind of visual work. So what I noticed is, if I gave them like a 2D space to work with, I'd get sort of the movement. I give them. Sorry, let me rewind. So I think something that I've been playing with that I've not seen before. I don't know if I've seen it before anywhere actually, but there's bound to be lots of artists working in different ways. But it's giving the plants a three-dimensional curvature through time and space. So the reason I did that is you're literally talking about nature, right? We are nature, and the universe is nature, and the plants are nature. It's all nature. So everything's moving in time, kind of, and everything's moving in curves and spirals. So the code itself started off kind of almost like flat, like given a flat line trajectory, like just dump some colorful elements in here. I should say actually, so the plants are informing where elements, visual elements like circles or lines or pixels or arcs or triangles or square or anything like that, the color of them, the size of them, the placement on the screen, and how many come out and are seen, so and which direction and what speed. So there's really like power of the plant to doodle in the programs. But when I started back, it was just like let a dot come out, or let a color change, or like where's this going? So I guess the evolution of letting them doodle did go through quite a human lens, in the sense of we understand written language and visual language in terms of these placements through space across a canvas, and so I wanted to allow the plants communication to emanate through a medium we could understand, to inform us. And I guess like one of the most interesting things I've seen is like as I've spent time with them, and each choice of like change that little bit of code to allow for a bit more space to create bigger shapes, smaller, whatever. As I've kind of gone through the process, I guess I feel super in sync with them, and it's gotten to the point where as they kind of draw themselves a little bit. Like they're very abstract, but it's like abstract self-portraiture. And I don't think of that in the sense of like, oh, I'm a human, I'm going to draw a picture of myself. I feel like it's an echo of themselves, like they're emanating, like it's holonic or something. It's like inside their energy is them, they are more of themselves. And it's abstract, but it's beautiful.
I
So
can imagine. I mean, everything I've seen, I think it's that part of getting outside of what our expectations are. It's like, it's when, we see this a little bit with human artists. There are those that when they do a self-portrait, it's a scramble of color, it's shapes. It's not a, let me draw my face and here's what my mouth looks like. And yet you look at this and you're like, I get it. I get it. I see you in that. And and I feel like that's somewhat, like you said, what you're doing, which is giving the plant an opportunity to say, hear, feel, and see me. I'll give you an example. When there's a class that I teach here in Dalmanhur called Communication with the Plant. No, yeah, Communication with the Plant World. And Communication with the Plant World has one segment of it that is where I blindfold everybody and I bring in different plants and I have you sit with the plant for, a few minutes. And then I bring the plant back out and you sit and you take notes. And we do this with 3 different plants. And it's fascinating to see the similarities between the group of what they write, because they don't talk as they write. So they experience a plant and then write, and then, like, some will say the plant has to be big with, like, I see this color or I feel these and these things. And it's amazing to see the similarities between the people, but that oftentimes do not reflect the physicality of the plant. Like, they'll see a plant that's really big and it'll be this teeny tiny little physical plants. And I think that that's in some ways what you're capturing with this work. You're giving the plant the opportunity to show their essence without being, to a certain extent, constrained by, sure, they're using elements of visuality that we understand, circles and lines and maybe spirals and shapes and stuff like that, but not necessarily in the way that we would expect them to come together. And so that's what gives plants that space. Do you find that as you've been going, they've been asking for more space?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I guess it's when you're like, I don't know, working as a team, it kind of all blends into one. So it's like I get super excited about something. I'm like, and I watch the data jump and I'm like, is that me? Is that them on me? Is that me? I'm like, And then, of course, there's like interactions and there's touch. I do, some of the paintings, I touch the plants while they're painting them. And other times they're just painting and I'll leave them alone in a room to paint on their own, like have a bit. There's not many plants in my house that are on their own. I've got my studio in my house. So, I've got loads of plants everywhere. So, are they informing each other? And actually that brings me on to like some of the more interesting stuff that's happened over the course. It's like, for instance, so with the audio side of it, I've done some synth work and I've kind of like, I'm working in a slightly different system because I don't have MIDI all plugged in through all the electronics and, it's not working. I'm literally getting a stream of data. And so I'm then channeling that data into coded environments. So, so the data can play, so the plant can play. So one of the things I tried was programming different bird sounds. So I did some field recordings and I found some stock, sounds from birds and this kind of thing. And I gave them an array of different bird sounds to work with, different plants. And I found what's quite interesting is like, have you ever noticed in when you're out in nature, how like suddenly the birds make a big noise, there's a big cacophony, there's like a whole hoo-ha going on and who knows what set that off, and then it'll go on for a bit wild, and then it will shush up again,
Right.
and you're like, okay, the bird's hanging out, like be a bird, that's cool, and and what I noticed is giving the bird song to the plants inside of a house, they do that too. So there's like these cacophonies. So the data keeps going. It's not like the data stopped, but somehow there are these cacophonies of sound and then a shushing in a really similar way, and it will kind of undulate throughout the day. And I'm like, okay then, and sometimes they don't shut up and sometimes it's all chill. But when I go back and read the data, I'm like, well, it, the plant was doing stuff, it just wasn't doing it there. So it's like, do they know? How did they know? Or how did that, how does that come to pass? So it's, yeah, kind of. And I guess, so I know that there's some research that shows that bird song stimulates the stoma. I mean, they're quite, stomata take a while to open, right? And it, close. That's the porous mouths on their leaves that help them feed on light and such like. So, you hear the bird song in the morning before the sun's come, and it's like, well, maybe that's just like stimulating them to like wake up and drink that sunlight as it comes. And it's like, that somehow the birds belong with the tree, and the tree belongs with the birds, and somehow, I mean, I think in terms of coding a bit because I'm coder, somehow that's coded into the plants, that's how they can produce this cacophony effect. And that somehow that must be like drinking a cup of tea for them. It's like having a cup of tea, like get down with your bird song.
And I think that's probably the things that you're starting to capture, right? As you do this, these are those, how do I say this? The connection points, the interactivity between, different species that we, on one hand, don't know how to isolate and understand. And on the other hand, nor do we want to,
No.
but we'd love to be able to connect in to that, to kind of see, okay, also, what does it reveal about that relationship? But also, what does it reveal about my own relationship? Like, am I supposed to be all, I don't know, the equivalent of that cacophony, which might not be vocal, but it might be a different kind of movement that is more important for me that I'm not doing because I've kind of gotten out of my natural rhythm. And that by hearing this, it's sort of comes to you and comes back into it, because even we as human beings, when we listen to those, I mean, at least I do, I know this, when I moved into an environment where I could hear, like you said, that cacophony of sound and that bird song, those moments when everything happens, I've noticed that my body reacts differently. And it's,
100%.
and you tap into that. I'm so curious as to if there are other types of, for lack of a better term, I'll say relationships or behavioral patterns that you are starting to see, especially, and I'm going to preface this by asking kind of a secondary question inside of this, which is, as a coder, of course, it's very easy and probably tempting to want to control the sound, like what it is that the plants create. We hear
Mhm.
this with some devices of plant music that maybe control it to give it a much more human sound, as
Mhm.
opposed to something that feels really as a real reflection. And I talked to an artist many years ago who had told me that one of the difficulties he had was the fact that he was trying to get closer and closer to a true representation of what the plants were experiencing, while at the same time not making it something that sounded like screeches and that I just wanted to turn it off as fast as possible. So I guess my question is, do you find yourself like, how have you navigated, and do you find that over time it's become easier or harder, or it's still something that's a big question mark to be the coder, so the co-creator, but at the same time co-create more freedom for the plants to express themselves through the work that you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. So I think I heard those questions along different tangents, so forgive me if I jump around a bit.
Please jump every direction you want. Exactly.
So it's like, okay, so one thing I want to talk about just while it's in my mind is quite early doors when I was like, when I did my first exhibition actually. I'd noticed it just before then, and it actually came up during the exhibition, so it was a bit like what, or in the setup, I think. But I noticed that two different plants wired to two different circuits, wired to two different computers, etc., etc. But they just had one leaf each, two leaves touching. So I noticed their data go in and out of sync. And by sync, I mean like literally the numbers were like kind of reading more or less the same for, I don't know, a minute. and you'd think, okay, that's an electrical phenomena, that's some kind of like interaction of this, what is that, what's this phenomenon? But then it would naturally go out of sync, and it's like, okay, nothing else has moved, and then it would come back in sync again. And the data is a representation of their breathing, basically, the rate of their being, and I don't know, it's essentially a tiny signal is being sent to them, and and then what bounces back is like how much potential for electrical flow is going on, and it's tiny, tiny, tiny amount of energy. So it's like, basically, how does that happen? Kind of the plants are going in and out of sync in these sort of human made systems, because if you take the pads off the plant, you don't get anything. It's a big chain of zeros. So when you're
Right.
seeing data, when the pads are attached to the plant, that's the plant. And yeah, sure, touching can affect, and I'm sure there's like different things that can affect the environment, affects them, definitely. But yeah, so that was one other really interesting phenomena that I don't have any answers. I'm learning. I've often got imposter syndrome. I'm not like the best coder. I'm just like, what am I doing? I don't know. I just feel like this huge gravitational pull and a sense of weird urgency, and it kind of comes in floods, and then and then I crash and I don't do it for a while, and then it comes back again, kind of artist style. And yeah, so these are the things that I want to kind of keep going with and investigate more. And in terms of like, did I do that? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, like, I kind of, the circuits and the computer and yeah, like, I sort of stuck them into the system, right? But what's that? Like, the question is, what's the extra thing going on that can't so easily be explained? If they stayed in sync for like a given amount of time, and then only moved out of sync when you parted that, like, it could be an electrical phenomena, or and maybe I'm wrong, maybe someone can explain it to me, but for me, having worked with the plants for so long in different ways, it's like, no, there's a whole load of interaction, and there's a whole load of in syncing and connectivity that happens above ground, because these are potted plants that aren't sharing roots. I mean, probably should do a bit more work with the root sharing phenomena. But yeah, so to come back to your question about the code, um, so obviously, any environment you build is encased, right? It's like a screen is only as big as the screen is. So
Right.
when I code, I kind of inform the code, like, don't, like, use that data, but please don't try not to leave the screen, right? So
Right.
like, that was one of the natural phenomena, was I don't want the data to just, I don't want the information from the plants to just fall off the screen and disappear. I want to see it. So that's kind of what got me going on, like, okay, we're going to have to, send this thing in an orbit. And then suddenly I felt really comfortable with that, because I'm like, the whole universe is in, or, everything's like spiraling and orbiting. And, this is where we are. So, and then in terms of like, like, how does the plant inform the visual content and any audio content? It's like, well, I have to kind of grab that data and go, okay, this is the beginning is naught, the beginning is no data, and the top end is like more or less the furthest it can possibly go given the system, and then it's what happens in between. So if you give the same code to a peace lily, or then to a monstera plant, Swiss cheese plant, or to a philodendron, or palm, or whichever plant you give it, if you give it that same code, you see these different kind of flow forms coming out. So it's like, well, yeah, as a coder, I've been like, okay, you can't bounce off screen too much, otherwise we can't see you,
Right.
and there's only so much color spectrum that a human can see. We know that there's like a huge, rich electromagnetic electromagnetic spectrum, but we have a certain kind of color wheel. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to say, the beginning of the color and the end of the like I'm going to have to hold it in somehow and embody. So like, yeah, I'm controlling some things, and some sketches, I call them, like some things, okay, are very contained, like only draw in black and white and only go a third across the page. And I want to see this. I want you to write me a plant alphabet, So it's like very, like very strict, and then some it's just like, okay, go wild, use everything, go anywhere and just see what comes out. So I think for me, like it's kind of like a space where, yeah, I've got some control, a lot of control, no, whatever. It's like, let's see what the different plants do with that. And then let's talk about it, rather than like, sort of trying to decide that there has to be a rule about how much it can or can't. And I think, the difference is, can you see that plant generating something meaningful um, across time, in and of itself, by itself, and then what happens when we interact. And it's funny, like the journey along, people are like, I want it to react, I want it to be like a toy, I want it to, like, I want to just touch the plant and it does this or cool art and that's it, and I'm like, wow, there's a real hunger to thingify and make toy out of nature. And I don't see that as a bad thing. I think that that's innately natural. Like we playful kind of creatures, but I think there's like two different spaces and they're both valuable. And but for me, the value in evolving our sense of sensing, actually, and our sense of knowing and seeing with other life forms, for me that has bigger value, because it's that deep mystic. It's the deep known unknown. I know I'm part of this natural world, and I know I can feel things I don't have words for, and like I know I can feel my plants around me being alive. I just want to be able to like extend that and explore that, and I want there to build a bridge,
Mhm.
So it's family.
Okay, but we have to take a very, very quick break to share with you one of our eco-conscious business partners. For over a decade, I've had the profound joy of working with the music of the plants, a musical instrument made just for plants. This very music is what sparked my own plant reawakening, guiding me to reconnect with nature in an entirely new way. Imagine listening to the harmonious melodies of your plant companions and feeling their wisdom and presence through the language of music. It's an experience that has transformed my life and the lives of so many other people. If you're curious about the hidden songs of plants and want to connect to your plant friends in a completely new way, I invite you to discover more at tigriadagenia.com/music of the plants. It's in the show notes. Plant music is great for healing, sharing, and personal connection. Let's continue our journey of personal evolution and plant consciousness together with the songs of plants. No, and this is great because I think you've touched on a few elements that are hard. First of all, uh, one part that you said that I hear it all the time, right? When I work with the music of the plants and I, have these demonstrations and everybody's like, does the plant react? And my answer is always yes. And I realize as time has gone on that yes, to a certain extent needs to be qualified, which is, yes, there is a reaction, but please don't always think that the reaction is, first of all, right away, like you just said, but also that the reaction is in the music itself, in the sense that just a few episodes back, episode, I believe, 98 of the podcast was all about receiving plant communication in other ways. I was trying to show, memory and all these other aspects of how we receive. And I think the hard part when we're trying to do things is that, like you said, it becomes this novelty where it's, okay, I'm going to touch the plant and I want to see the visuals change in a certain way. But in reality, the plant might be responding to you in something completely different, something that's even outside of the scope of what you're doing. It's not because I touch the plant, all of a sudden I'm going to get an electrical response. I might be getting a response that's a memory. I might be getting some kind of, volatile organic chemical that gets released. I might be getting all these other things. And I think that for now, because of our own constraints and our own kind of noviceness, like we're young at this, right?
Yeah,
So
we're so
we're
young.
totally young at this. And so we're giving you like one parameter. So for example, from our perspective, we started with this whole electrical signals, and now electrical signals have moved off to be sound on one side or something audible. Let me put audible on one side, and another side is some visual piece of it. But and just that already is starting to show us more depth when you combine, like you said, with the bird sound and with others, when you combine these two together, you all of a sudden have a richness. But now, and imagine there was a device. I don't know if you remember this. I think the device was called Florence many years ago. That had like a bubble around the plant, and this one collected organic chemicals, like all these different organic compounds, and turned that into speech.
Oh, wow.
So it was this really cool, the woman, gosh, I can't believe I don't remember her name, but I'm almost positive that the actual device was called Florence, and used the Twitter vocabulary. Like the vocabulary that they were pulling from was a language model that was coming from Twitter. And basically the plant would respond through these chemicals. And so can you imagine already bringing those three together, right? So I have this visual representation, this audible sound-based one, and then these written words, which are really human-like, because once you convert into... And so I think we're going to continue to have these different layers that allow us, because most of us are not entering into relationship with plant in a completely telepathic way, we're using what we can, which is technology, to help us kind of, give the plant more space. And I think this is totally fair, exactly, to mediate that relationship. And so I guess I'm going to ask you a question that takes you backwards, but then to spring you forward. So my backwards question to you is, when you first started, like, first of all, what was the inspiration that got you started with this? And what did you think you were going to accomplish, even just at a very cursory level? What did you think you were actually doing, like when you first started to work with plants in this way? And then I'll ask you the spring forward question.
It's funny, up until recently, when people are like, where did you get the idea from? Like, oh, I've nicked someone else's idea. I'm like, it's like an amalgam, right? There's all these different people doing all these different things, and researchers and scientists and artists, and it's amazing. And so I used to answer, oh, I read The Secret Life of Plants, 20 years ago, and was like, bosh, like, this is special, this is important.
Right.
And that's sort of generally my answer. But recently I've been having this floods of memories as a really young child, and like hearing people call plants like dandelions weeds. And then I would go to them and I would whisper, and I'd be like, I'm so sorry. I know that you're special. I know that you're not
Oh,
rubbish.
that's
And
fantastic.
so cute. It's little me. And I just like, I keep having these memories, and I'm like, oh, I just have those like little inner epiphany moments. So I guess I'm informed by a plant sensitivity from a young age. And, I've kind of gone through different phases of heightened sensitivity and, more like mundania. But I've definitely had my phases. And I remember having this phase in, I think it was late teenagers or early 20s, where I felt magnetized to not just hold trees. Like I'd go hug them. I was always stroking plants and flowers, always wanted to touch and be with them, and have since learned that gentle touch with plants stimulates their growth in general. You don't want to be too rough or too like intense, kind of come with a gentle energy. But yeah, so I had that sense that they wanted to be touched, and I'd, hug a tree or whatever. But I went through this phase of listening to roots. So I'd get right down there in the dirt, and I'd like have my head right, with a tree, and I'd just lay there, and I'd be like listening. It's it's not the same as listening with your ears. It is, but it's like feeling, listening, feeling. And I just get this like sense of almost like the world turning upside down, but not like I'd be very grounded, but it was like the feeling that up is down and down is up. And you know how like when you see the branches and the root, like the roots, it's kind of like, it's not exactly mirror, but there's like this mirror-ish image between how a lot of the root forms grow, and it was like I could feel the water moving through the roots, and I wasn't high. I was just maybe occasionally I was, but I was just like I was feeling where I was in the forest or in nature. So I guess when people say, where did the work start for you? It kind of started there, and then it kind of started with different inspirational speakers like yourself and listening. And then I was like listening to different plant music, and I'm like, where are the visuals? Like, what's going on? And it was like I joined an MA just before the pandemic, and that was I think that was my first project, and it was like my soul was just like, I'm doing this, and they were like, do that as an end project. I'm like, no, I'm doing this now. Like bam, I've got to do this. So I found some open source circuit models from Sam Cusimano, and kind of stripped them back, took all the MIDI out, stripped, and have since played around and things. And yeah, just like put some circuits together with some help from teachers and friends and family, and yeah, just kind of yeah, just started tuning in. So I guess I got to this route from lots of different sources of nourishment and nutrients from my environment, and it's non-linear. When I read The Secret Life of Plants, I wasn't remembering all those things that I used to feel and think when I was little. It's just a magnetic, right? It kind of it evolves with you. It's like when you watch a plant grow, and it kind of over time the leaves take on more characteristic form, but the tiny plants unfurling, and it's all connected. Anyway.
I love how you mix those, like you showed that progression and how all these pieces sort of flow into that organic movement that takes you where you are today. Because I think that that's really true for so many of us. It's just that we're taught that you're supposed to have that boom moment, right? That one thing. And it really isn't true. I mean, everybody's journey is filled with these like little tiny nudges that kind of took us in these directions, and things like you said that maybe when you were younger or years ago, you didn't know that they were playing into something, but that now you realize how they play into it. I completely empathize. Like I can feel it in my body as you were talking about it, that whole upside downy thing that happens when you give yourself that opportunity to listen deeply to things that we don't ever give space to. Because if I tell somebody, okay, I just want you to sit and listen, most likely they're going to sit where they are with their head up, and they're going to listen to kind of the airspace. But even I also, in several of the classes that I do in person, I encourage people, and in even some of the meditations that I have, for example, on YouTube and Insight Timer, I encourage people to, like you said, put your ear down to the ground, especially if you could do it on a root, for example, on a tree, or in something that's very root dense. Like I do it often in grass. I love lying on the grass, feeling that connection, and then turning my head with the intention of like having my ear really close to that kind of the soil root structure. Exactly. And we always get something unexpected, because sometimes you hear interaction to a certain extent, whatever the actual sounds are doesn't even matter, but the feeling is interaction, like there's got to be ants and spiders and like, exactly. And then other times it's the combination of the other, the types of grasses or of small wild plants that are in there. I don't know why. I actually just so I did a photo shoot the last time I was in the US, and the at the very end she asked me, because we did it outside in nature, and she asked me, she's like, do you have any photos that you want to take? And I'm like, yes. I was dressed in like a cute little dress, and I'm like, I want to lie down and I need photos of me lying down, because it's such a formative feeling modality for me that takes me out of the kind of human air, head in the air type of thing, and brings me down. Exactly, brings me down to a completely different level. And I love that also informed the way that you kind of have been progressing through this, which is kind of whole body, right? Whole sensation, not
Massively.
just.
Yeah.
It's so much more exciting, I think, that way, and more true to the nature of the plants that you're working in and such. So here's the forward looking question, or at least present looking question. What do you think has really changed in the way that you think about or experience or interact with plants since you started to work on this, and you have kind of a, a new expression, like you've been able to experience this new form of expression with plants?
Wow. I mean, it's kind of it's intertwined with a very personal part of my journey. I mean, the experience of having a deeper relationship with them is very personal, but I actually I was born without enough bone on my hips, and that got kind of progressively harder as I got older, more painful, and different complications. And then in the run up to sort of starting to work with them, in the way that I am, I was told, you've got to have major surgery, and I was put on this wait list, and then COVID happened, and there was all this waiting time. It was meant to be on a wait list for a year. It turned out to be like whatever, I think 3.5 years or something. And they restructured my body. So they cut the bones to pieces, pinned me back together again, loads of metal. And so it was quite intense. And I only just had the bolts out a few months ago, and there was a bit of recovery on that. And so this whole time they've been with me. And I mean, I thought I was going to become like mega genius in my recovery and just like code all the time and like turn into the most genius person at all of this. And I'm like, no, my brain was like mush. I could do
Right.
nothing. I couldn't even watch TV for longer than 5 minutes for about a year. It was like I was mash up. But constantly had my plants around me and that relationship evolving. And I had the project kind of helping me kind of feel like it's like compassion, right? It's like all of my plants are brilliant artists in their own right, and they're all growing at their own rate, and they're all being in their own way, and they're all blooming when it's their moment. They don't all, sometimes they bloom at similar times, and not all of my plants bloom, but like, I think what I'm curving back to is something that I find really important at this time, is to remember that we're embedded in a system of like constant harvest, where it's like, okay, we need to like continually harvest everything now. Like, give me my crop, give me my McDonald's, give me my, this, that, give, take, make flowers, bloom, come on,
Right.
do. It's performative, it's on demand, it's extractive. And it's this thing of like, I almost had this extractive mentality around my recovery, like, well, I've started this thing, and while I'm unable to do XYZ, I'll extract and I'll perform and I'll produce, and instead it was just like, no, just be, just actually be. And
Mhm.
obviously, I still had things going on and had to work, and worked with the plants a bit, but it's like this. as my journey has unfolded with them, it's like a sense of contentedness over however tiny or big I am. You know, each plant is like you kind of you've touched upon before, where you know a tiny plant can have a very big energy, and actually some really big plants have quite soft, gentle energy, and it's not what you think it's going to be. And you know, not all the leaves unfurl at the same time. Not all flowers bloom every year. You know, each we're not meant to extract from ourselves, and we're not meant to extract from each other. I mean, we do, like, maybe that's a bit of a blanket statement, but it's like this sense of like the actual fruition, the actual blooming, and the actual emanation of kind of meaning and meaning making and creativity is kind of, I guess it's embedded in like a loving reality if we let it be. And I think it's that softness that I've kind of had a mirror. I've always kind of been considered a bit too soft. And, you know, I've got my edgy side, but, you know, I'm sort of quite a gentle creature, really. And it's like being with plants, it's like, it's okay. You know, you don't have to be like performative and edgy and like constantly out to get something. Like, you can just be.
That being part, that presence is a recurring. It's one of the things that I love about doing this podcast, for example, is that it's given me the opportunity to meet so many incredible people that are working so closely with plants in these, I don't want to say alternative ways, but in the sense of not just your traditional, like I work in a garden center or any of these things, but more of this co-creative and co-expressive aspect. And this theme of being, of presence, seems to be so continuous. It's something that comes up with pretty much everybody, and I love it because it's what for me has become my plantness. Like when I think about the importance of humanity reawakening their inner plantness, it is that piece, that plantness where our instinctiveness, right, our humanness gives us our instincts, gives us
Mm,
our motion and our velocity to a certain extent, and
mm,
our ability to like move, and that our action is tied to movement, where I
mm,
feel like our plantness is about our actions tied to beingness, about to that
mm,
presence. And they're both really important. Like nobody is trying to say that as we work closer with plants we're supposed to forget our humanness. On the contrary, it's a reminder of our true humanness, which is this
mm,
total aspect that, sure, we have a preponderance obviously of the action and of the movement energy because we are animals, but that doesn't mean that I forget or completely let go of this other side of myself, which is that presence. And presence can be very active, right?
mm,
Presence and beingness can still be an active force in your life. It's just not
mm,
a movement in that perspective. And it
mm,
has also varying degrees, and it reminds us the importance of rest, and it reminds
mm,
us the importance of recognizing and being aware of where we are, of when I
mm,
need to move, of when I need to sit, of when I need to be fast, when I need to be slow, when I need
mm,
to be big, and when I need to be small. Like all these things of beingness is that it's almost like you reconnect to your full scope. You have
mm,
access to, and you choose which ones. Some of them you might never touch because it's just not part of who you are, but you have access now, because
mm.
in that beingness the blocks that we normally have sort of fade away, and we have the opportunity to be all these things, and that to me is precious.
It's super precious, and it's so interesting. One of my projects that I kind of is an ongoing research around Earth energies, and specifically the Schumann resonances. And like there was quite a lot of hoo-ha over the fundamental Schumann resonance, which is like on average 7.83 hertz. It goes kind of, I don't know, half a hertz below that and half a hertz above that. It bounces around. It's a natural phenomena, right? So it's not like a specific one
Right.
thing. But there are all these harmonics that are kind of a set. that go alongside that fundamental. And, the fundamental is the kind of resting point, as it were. And that's just about in our kind of resting mind space. So our brain kind of, the different brain states, which again aren't like some fixed point, but you've got your, what is it, delta, deep sleep, theta, kind of meditative, beta, active, alpha, gamma, all the different ones. So you literally, these are embedded in the planet, and these are embedded in our minds, and these influence, these sort of different resonances influence all of life on Earth, or a lot of it, most of it. And they're finding now that the Schumann resonances can have an impact on plants and plant growth. And what they found when they looked at these Earth energies is that about, as one study, I can't remember the name of it, maybe there's a few, but that about half of the, I think they scanned about 1,000 people. So like, it, to me, it seemed credible when I read it. And it was like about half of people's kind of brain patterns, the brainwave changes sort of shifted and seemed in sync with the planet. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of like, and obviously, like in a lot of urban environments, I'm in London, it's like, it's quite a lot of electro smog, it's like got a lot of electrical noise, and they generally have the centers to like receive the data from the earth energies in kind of mountains and more like remote locations, so they can hear them without all the noise. And I find this interesting, this whole kind of bridging human, like more than half the population of the world are in urban environments now. I can't remember what it's like, nearly 60% or something. So, and being that everywhere's 5G and everywhere's like hyper techno electro smoggy, it's like, how do we channel and stay true to the antenna being that we are for nature, and how do we commune in ways that are beneficial for our bodies and our sense of connection with each other. And so, yeah, like, I feel like trees are kind of conduits for different earth energies. And so, spending time with, there's lots of trees in a lot of cities, not all, but just to touch a tree, to be with them. And yeah, I think plants can act as sort of special conduits. And I've also noticed, like, we ourselves can support nature in urban environments, because like, my old flat, actually, that there was this kind of crisscross of where all of the mobile pylon signals kind of crisscrossed. And I kept noticing, like, bees, especially big bumblebees, were getting super exhausted
Hmm.
at these intersections. And I was having to, like, go get them, pick them up, feed them honey water, and walk them down the road out of this crisscross. And, like, I can only imagine that that's sort of affecting our minds and our ability to feel in sync with our own natural rhythms, and the natural rhythm of our environments. We've got like these synthesized environments. So I guess what kind of got me onto doing the plant art was this feeling like, I'm okay to whisper to trees and plants, and I'm okay to hug them and touch them, and I'm okay with all that, but people think I'm weird. So how do we build a bridge where it's not weird anymore? It's like, well, if we kind of introduce something that people can see and hear and interact with, then it's safe again, because there's a reason, right? It's okay. So yeah, I think that was like something that.
I like that. I like that also, that that's almost, especially because, like you said, in urban environments, I do think it's important for people to realize that also plants help you attenuate, like they help you, um, shift your own frequency and vibration and understand like your body rhythm and such. It helps you adapt because especially if you have older plants of any sort, especially, older trees. I remember being walking through Shepherd's Bush many years ago and walking through Shepherd's Bush and literally like touching every single tree. I was doing a combination of orienting of trees, which is this project connected here to Dominher, but also like connection. And I had an older gentleman who asked me, like, he was like, I can see that you're doing something, but what are you doing? And it was really, he was very sweet. And I was like, and I told him what I was doing in the sense of the orienting of the trees, but also, you know, these trees, especially when, in Shepherd's Bush, if you're in that area, these beautiful, I think they're like pseudo sycamores, or I can't remember exactly which kind of trees they are. But, these trees have been there for a while. They're not
Mm.
newly planted. And so therefore they've been able to adapt themselves to be able to thrive in that environment.
Uh-huh.
And so that was part of what I was doing, right? Like connecting in and saying, I'm in this city environment. It's super dense. It has all these aspects that you were just talking about. Help me be okay. Help me
Uh-huh.
find the rhythm that works, that is like, it's not my probably natural rhythm. It's not the rhythm I have when I'm living somewhere else, but it is a
Mm.
rhythm that can be natural to me. So just as you've adapted, help me adapt, help me
Mm.
connect into what it is that I need to do. And I think that you're right that these projects, these types of projects that act to a certain extent as bridges, they help people sort of feel safe enough to, not everybody feels safe in the weird and the woo like we do, right? So
Mm.
so this helps them see something that they can grasp onto with the way that they've been taught, and they say, oh, okay, well, now I'll let myself sort of go into it, and I'll let
Mm.
myself connect into it because I see this part. And that's exactly, I often tell people that with the music of the plants. I'm like, the plants to a certain extent are using kind of human rhythms and human
Mm.
sounds. And
Mhm.
that's okay because it's their way of, for some people, that is going to be the only way that the person is going to let their guard down and let them
Yeah.
reconnect.
It's like having a Duolingo in a sense, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, like okay, that like it's an interpreter, you know.
absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely. I am so this is probably again like many of our conversations, just ones that we could just go on and on about all the cool things that we're understanding and developing. And I love it. I love it so much. And I love that we finally were able to sit down because I do feel people, like I said, people like you are bridging this gap for a lot of people. And at the same time, you're creating more languages for the plants to be able to express themselves in this human world. Like, not all of us can go out into the middle of the jungle. And so it's beautiful to have these other ways that plants. I have a painting on my wall that was drawn, it was painted with it by a chimpanzee. And
Mm.
it's a great, way for somebody like me who probably will never be around a chimpanzee to constantly think in chimpanzee energy and to feel the expression, an artistic expression from the chimpanzee and the colors that were chosen and how this chimpanzee did it and what are all the, like, it's abstract art, and I absolutely adore it. So to me, this is kind of the exact same thing. This is giving, plants another avenue that helps them, helps us communicate and connect and express and experience and learn and all those beautiful things. So, Sophie, where can people find you? I mean, obviously, I'm going to put everything into the show notes, but I want you to tell, how do people see what you're creating and how do they get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Well, you can find me on my website, which is flowanecho.com. It's flow of water and the linking word echo, like echolocation.com. And also on Instagram, same tag. And yeah, I mean, I haven't been exhibiting as much as I was lately, but I have been getting involved in solar punk events. So I do a bit of exhibiting at different kind of community based, it's kind of artivism, activism. We're doing lots of different events around London. So that's sort of bubbling up. And yeah, so at the moment I'm quite London based. I've got a few events kind of coming up soon, but not on my website. So I guess I better chuck them in there. But yeah, so you can keep in touch with me on Insta. That would be great. For
Perfect.
more
Perfect.
follows.
Well, I'll make sure that I'll include, your handle and all of the links to your website and such in the show notes. And of course, as always, as things come up, I'll post them into the Naturally Conscious community and share them out with others so that we can continue this conversation and exploring these topics. Lately, I've been traveling a lot more, and I've been having lots of conversations on all of these different methods that are coming out relating to connections. So I have a feeling that the coming year, especially, is going to bring us to a whole new level of this type of expression and co creation. So I'm very, very excited to see where everything goes. Sophie,
It's
this has been really wonderful. I am so excited we finally got to do it. And I am so happy that people get to learn more about you and your work. Any
oh,
last words before we go?
um, that's a really good question. I actually did have notes for the conversation. So I'm just going to quickly look at the notes. I think I did that. Uh,
I like it. She's going through her notes. And it looks like we've touched everything. This is awesome.
yeah. Um, so no, I do want to expand a little bit on the solar punk theme, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
of course.
So solar punk, and actually we're running events under the subgenre eco punk. It is like I think the reason it's poignant for me is I mean, I know growing up in the 80s and 90s, it's like non-stop visions of dystopic futures or like cyberpunk kind of settings, or like everything's decimated in the future. It's like, or it's kind of weird and like emotions very abstract and zeroed out. It's all very like 1984 or like, and it's like, so I'm like, well, collectively, our collective vision, we need to get a handle on things. Like stuff is changing, it has to change. And I think, it is changing. I think like it's easy to get scared with the way that the oligarchs are running the world and the way that everything is so hell-bent on like a constant harvest push for extraction, more taking from the planet. Like how is this gonna slow down? I think it's easy to get lost there in the crises that we're embedded in, and the poly crises, all the different things happening to the forests and to the natural landscape, and all the ways in which humans are subject to an abstractual system that doesn't let them live in harmony with nature. It's kind of like a privileged position to be able to, like, I don't know, just go build an amazing log cabin somewhere. Like a lot of people are locked down in kind of simple scenarios, and I think like and sometimes very painful ones. Like it's this feeling that we need to collectively vision things in a more adaptive way and a low impact way. And I think like the solar punk and eco punk genres are kind of, it's being able to see that we do have a lot of solutions. And I definitely feel like plants will be painting and singing and making a lot of music and doing, and we'll definitely be visualizing a lot of the earth energies that maybe we need to bathe in more. And there's going to be a lot of beautiful creative intervention, and then it's this adaptive quality for our communities, where we'll be farming in the cities more, and we'll be sharing that produce in a different way. And if we don't vision these things, I'm not saying it's easy or that I've got all the answers, or I do believe that most of the solutions we need are here. I think it's a management issue, like getting it to like fit in a way where communities do have autonomy to sort of collectively make choices and start to like rein in and pull in what we need in lower impact ways. and we're kind of subject to this like constant control from markets of like, buy sell, what's cheapest, what's available. And I think, actually repurposing and reusing and remaking and all of these things that kind of lead to a more circular economy are kind of embedded in those creative genres. So they're why I'm kind of making events in them, because I for one, I'm bored of seeing dystopic futures on the movies, and that's all we got. Is that all we've got? Is that it?
Right.
you know what
Right,
else
right.
what else have we got?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this up, and I'm glad that that's like our closing message. Because, for example, when I founded the naturally conscious community, and when I started, especially even this podcast, bringing on so many different kinds of artists and in nature inspired, but not just artists that like. There's beautiful people out there that are, painting flowers and stuff like that. But what I wanted was that co-creation, because I wanted to provide those other models. And I love that you said these are the genres that are coming out that are helping, using that artistic flair and that co-created flair. In other words, the non-linear, non-human logic of other kin connected with the visionary aspects of the artistic mind that can see something that doesn't exist, in order for us to start to have places where we can visualize or synthesize or whatever it might be, a version of the future that is the thing we actually want to live in, rather than continuously following the Hollywood model that shows us what we don't want to see, what we're headed for as what it is. So I think that that's a beautiful note to close in, is to remember that the supporting these types of projects and these types of genres and places like the naturally conscious community and events for like solar punk and eco punk and artistic spaces and co-created spaces are super important to support, because they are the visionaries that are giving us the opportunity to see the next incarnation of our world, the evolution we're moving towards, rather than just getting stuck in the past. So I thank you for saying that. And that's why I encourage everybody who's listening, who's watching, go and check these genres out. Go and see, where are there events of this type? Go into the naturally conscious community, go to places like Sophie's work and see that, and, share out what it is that we're doing and support it, and give yourself space to be in it, to also be in that creative process. We all have an opportunity to give our piece. That's a perfect place to end. So thank you again, Sophie, so much. Thank you for this. And thank you all. And this is another reminder to always remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. This is really the place where we're going to create the next generation. Resist that urge, create those spaces for yourself, and give yourself the opportunity to co-create the next evolution of your own life.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious Community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.